Just a heads up before you watch this video, it is not very high quality, and I accidentally cut myself off with the recording a few times, and it's not going to be very edited. I will edit it a little bit to keep it watchable, but this is really my first dive into a longer video rather than a TikTok. I've made those because it's fun, it's easy, it takes like 5 seconds to do that. But yeah, I am trying to make it presentable, easy to listen to and stuff, but it is not high quality. Okay, so I recently went and saw the Backrooms movie, like, I don't know, it was probably over a week ago, maybe 2 weeks, I have no idea. But I've been thinking about it ever since, and there's a lot of outside noises because I'm outside. My house is very noisy, and I don't normally, I don't really mess with making longer videos, but I've been thinking about this so much, so I kind of wanted to. I've seen like a lot of theories about what the movie means or what the Backrooms could be, and I've really enjoyed a lot of them, but I wanted to talk about some of the ones that interest me the most because, I don't know, like I said, they're very interesting. I'd say an honorable mention that, I don't know, I don't really subscribe to as a favorite, but I do enjoy a lot, is the theory that it's like how AI reproduces copies of things, and it's very flawed. I do really like that interpretation. It's just not my favorite one because there's others that I can connect to a lot more, and I feel like they have a more interesting weave into all the different levels of the story. Other thing, this one is one I haven't really seen repeated elsewhere, but that came to mind for me when watching it or afterwards. I don't fully subscribe to this one, but I am a big fan of it, is the idea that the Backrooms exists, like the reason that it is here is because it's like a parasite or like an anglerfish. Because one thing I also watched recently that I really fucking loved and everyone should watch, and I didn't expect to like it that much, is Infinity Train. I think I've only watched one episode of season 4, and that's the last season, but the 3 first seasons I've all watched, and I love them. Like, everything, the plots, the theming, the characters, I think it's incredibly well done. And I normally watch something and I'll have like complaints and things that I wish were different, and it's frustrating. I don't think there's anything I would change with the first 3 seasons of Infinity Train. With 3 whole seasons of a show that I have no issues with is like unheard of. I just love it so much. I think I was gonna say something else, but I forget. Oh yeah, it's also, the pacing is insane. Like, you'd think for a show called Infinity Train, it would be your average modern day long, drawn out, it goes on forever series. No, each season is like 10 episodes, and it's like nothing but plot. It's crazy. It's kind of refreshing, but again, kind of weird, because you'd expect Infinity Train of all shows to be drawn out and have lengthy stuff and all this filler, but it really is just a lot of answers. Anyway, I bring that up because one thing, I think when I was on season 1, I think that's where like the mechanics of the train are explored the most, is before it was revealed what the train does, I was kind of in the back of my head hoping that that's what it would be. It would be the train is infinite, it exists like this, it's so strange because it is a parasite that is luring people on. And slight spoiler, it isn't that. But I really found that idea interesting, especially with it being something like that appears man-made but is so unknowable, and I don't know, it really is like a trap to lure people in, and I find it very interesting, the idea that that could be, because it's an entity trying to entrap people and like eat them or whatever, I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely a tangent, but I would highly recommend Infinity trying it. Anyway, so yeah, I don't really subscribe to that one, but I feel like it would be very interesting to think out more. It's like a very fun idea to play with for me. But my favorite one, and it's kind of a work in progress mess of ideas right now, is something that is more like not really real. And normally I would hate the it was all a dream kind of theories. I feel like that's so stupid. It makes it really uninteresting. But I feel like that could really, really work with the Backrooms in Kane Parsons' movie and his world. I've only seen the movie. I'm mostly talking about that, but from what I've heard, they are like closely intertwined or similar, so it may apply. But my idea that I really, really love for the Backrooms, and what I wanted to talk about the most in the first place, is the idea that the Backrooms is what the Backrooms is what imagination looks like. And I say it in that specific way because it's inspired by a video that I've really incorporated into how I think on a subtle level. But by Solar Sands, I think the title is like what imagination looks like. I watched it years ago and I was really interested in it. And it always, like, specifically there's one point where he's showing images that are, I think, created or brought up as part of a paper he references. And one of them is a picture of a real swan versus a picture of a swan that, like, was imagined. I forget. There's a lot of ways brought up where people try to test, like, how accurate imagination is. Like, can you see physically what someone's imagined picture is? Or can they, like, brain scan and see what image you were thinking? So I'm not sure which study it's from, but there's one where there's the swan image and there's the mind swan. And the mind swan lives in my head. I love the mind swan. My cat is in the background climbing a tree. He's very cute. But that's just like, yeah, it's been part of how I think for a while because I've always found it so interesting and kind of relatable to some parts of how I think. The idea that, actually I'll get into that part later, but essentially I went on that whole rant about how I like this video. I rewatched it recently. I remembered the name, I found the video again, I rewatched it. And the first thing I couldn't help but think of, like midway through the Backrooms movie, I was watching it and it just clicked in my mind the parallels that I could see between these two ideas. And I really, really liked that. And it's not just that video, but that idea was like the foundation of it for me. I've also seen other things exploring the idea that neurodivergent people in particular, I saw a post the other day saying that I should check this. I haven't checked it. It's just like something I'm thinking about in my mind right now. But the idea that neurodivergent people use external objects as storage for memories and like reminders and stuff more often than other people do, which, like I said, I haven't double checked, but I do that so much. Like, I work as a dog groomer, for example, and we bathe the dog. Well, I don't groom them, I bathe them and I dry them, but I'll bathe the dogs, and at one point in this whole process, you have to remember to clean their ears. And I started out, I'd clean their ears before the bath because I was just like, why not? So I formed that habit. And then after a while of having this job, I was like, I feel like it makes more sense practically to clean the ears afterwards because some of the ear gunk gets washed off during the bath. So it's kind of saving time, resources, whatever. To do it after, it's more efficient. Except I don't have that habit now. So what I do is I'll set like the flea comb, we use it to clean the gunk out of their eyes, the eye goop. because you have to do that anyway too. I'll set the flea comb in the tub, and as I'm cleaning up the tub, getting the dog out afterwards, I'll see that and be like, I need to clean their ears, and then I put it away. So this idea I also really connect with. I do that with a lot of things, but there's a good example. And I'm sure there's more, but all of that to say, these ideas, they're kind of like a web I've been thinking about in my mind. I really like these ideas in relation to the Backrooms because I feel like it's such an interesting lens to view it through. I feel like every lens to view it through is so interesting. I love seeing the theories on it. And I'm very glad that after that initial boom of videos where they were all just like, here's explaining what the Backrooms movie means because nobody got it, I am starting to see more that are like people talking about theories and what they connected to. And they are so interesting. I love them. Anyway, I really like this idea of imagination in the Backrooms because I've always been so interested in it myself. For example, just what I've brought up already, I guess, but the idea that the brain does not need to store memory accurately for you to remember it. It's a context thing. Like your brain, it's yours. You've been alive all this time. You have all this context and memories. So if you are trying to recall something or think something, you don't necessarily need to start from square one. The grass is green. You just start off with the grass because in the back of your head, you already know the grass is green. That kind of thing. And it really interests me because I imagine that's how, at least for me, I feel like it would probably be applicable to everyone or most people, but that would be how the brain works in general. Like if you were to recall a picture, such as in those studies in the What Imagination Looks Like video, you wouldn't necessarily be recalling the perfect picture, the exact lights, the shades, everything that was there. Probably with photographic memories or stuff like that, it would be closer to that. But you don't necessarily have to because you have the context there. So maybe you don't need to imagine all the bark on a tree. You just need to imagine a brown stick going out of the ground. And that's enough for you to autocomplete the picture that was there that you once saw. And it just is so interesting in relation to the Backrooms for me, especially, okay, I said all this background of like the idea of talking about, but I want to go into like the theory side of it now. I think in relation to the movie, how this would apply is that the Backrooms is, or let's not say the Backrooms is, I imagine that this movie is Mary's flawed memory. This is what Mary's imagination looks like. Because, and the thing that struck me the hardest with this at the end is how the company is saying, we used to be an MRI company. That struck me as very interesting. And I've seen a lot of theories about like this being literal and like how like the company history and how that would have resulted in them getting into the Backrooms, or how, wow, the chickens are loud right now, or how, I don't know, just from a purely logical, literal standpoint, this makes sense in the lore. I find it interesting, however, though, for, like, especially with the movie as a standalone thing, they are really loud. But especially if you're taking the movie as a standalone thing, because that's my context for it mostly, you just get to the end of this movie and they're like, yes, we used to be an MRI company and like a brain scan company, and it struck me as so interesting after this series of strange half-formed series and rooms and strange characters and all these things that are meant to strike you as odd because they are. And especially with Mary as our character that kind of lasts through the end. Like, we have Clark, but I feel like in the end, the movie is kind of Mary's lens, because we often see, like, her reactions to Clark, her dynamics with Clark. We see how he affects her life. We see how she sees him. She tells him off at the end. How she survives, and, like, by the end, we've lived out her story more fully, and it's still in continuation, basically, rather than Clark, who was a note in her story. So that leads me to why I feel that this interpretation would be it's Mary's imagination, but and not like Clark's or someone else's. But also, I feel like the Backrooms is such a good interpretation of how flawed memory is. And, like, obviously, that's, like, the point, is it's a flawed memory. It's recreating things that aren't the way they actually were. But and I do love that lens of just, like, this is it's the thing the Backrooms does. But we're going to take that, for now, to my interpretation of Mary, because it's just such an interesting and good representation of the way that is on a human level, because we do have all these strange things going on, and it's in such a particular way. One thing that really struck me too is at the dinner table scene. I've heard a lot of, or maybe not the dinner table scene necessarily, but that point of the movie where Clark has been in the Backrooms for a while, and then Mary then re-finds him. I've heard people comment a lot that Clark's shift in character to, like, showing his full crazy was very sudden. It was startling. They did that. He wasn't really fully showing the signs of it before, and there were the signs before. He just wasn't acting it, but he was talking kind of crazy. But that it's so sudden, and I feel like that really speaks to how memory works. Like, if you were Mary, you have this client, Clark, and you're like, okay, these are some concerning behaviors, but we're trying to work through them. And she's like kind of on the fence about it. Like, she doesn't call on him for being crazy. She hears him out, and she, like, kind of sits with it and thinks about it. So you're seeing these signs, and you're wondering back and forth, what should I do about this? Is it this bad? Or maybe you're even ignoring the signs. And, like, that really speaks to how humans can perceive things, because then suddenly they're all out. He's actually crazy. And especially from, like, a bystander's point of view, like, you didn't know what was going on internally. You saw a normal man who was doing normal stuff in society, and then now he's a crazy man. And obviously, internally, that was building all along. But in a memory, as a viewer of this, you don't see that. So it kind of does look like it just was a sudden switch up. And it interests me so much in particular, and I connect that to this theory rather than just the Backrooms on its own being a flawed memory, is I believe that the Clark in, like, the family dinner scene and all that, like, that's supposed to be the real Clark. He's just been down there a while. It's not a still life. He wasn't swapped out. That is Clark. That is acting in this strange way. That is almost being misremembered, but it is the real him. That's not quite an exact wording, but I'm just going off the thoughts that come to me. But that's the real Clark. That's not a still life that's misremembered. That's not the Backrooms that are misremembered. That's a person. Let me move that phone again. But that's one example in particular, like I said, that points me more so to it being a human flawed memory than the Backrooms on its own. And I don't want to fully subscribe to the it's all fake idea. I feel like I would rather prefer it's in the middle, where it is a flaw, it is a misremembering, but of events that may have partially happened. So maybe in this theoretical universe interpretation of the Backrooms is real, but this is Mary's flawed remembering of it. And anyway, but there's just so much, like, the movie says it all for itself. It's kind of hard to think of an example I should use on my own when the movie really illustrates it really illustrates so well this idea of misremembering and how all of it is misremembered, is twisted and warped. It's hard to say that because it just speaks for itself so much better than I could ever say that. But okay, so I'm going to try and more concisely summarize all that now. I've been thinking about it for a moment so I can try and like bring all this together into a coherent idea instead of just, wow, I listened to this guy talk about nothing for 30 minutes. I don't know how long this will be, but you get the point. But essentially, I really like this idea, this theory that the movie we are watching, it is Mary's flawed perception of the Backrooms. Perhaps that is being studied after the fact, as if we take into account the brain scan idea. And we do, like, it just fits very well with this whole flawed memory thing, as I said like 20 times. But that, to some extent, these events were reality. Mary was a person. Clark was her client. Maybe even the Backrooms were real. I feel like that could go either way with this theory. Like, the Backrooms could either just be a very twisted misremembering or loss of Mary's memory, or it could go more literal and the Backrooms could have been real too. Or wait, let me step back. The Backrooms could have been real, in quotations, because they are Mary's misremembering. I will say, though, that the theories that it's like Clark's brain shaping this architecture and all are very good. But we're going to go with my Mary lens because we're talking about Mary. So it could go two ways, I'm thinking, with this, where the Backrooms are real, in quotes, because they are Mary's misremembering. Her misremembering of her childhood home, which is already slightly explored, etc., etc., but they're very warped. And looking back on all this, she can't really see what it really was. She can just see the fear, the dreariness, how uncomfortable and scary it all was, resulting in us watching this experience, seeing these strange back rooms that were never really there. Or, my cat just was being goofy again. Or it could be that the back rooms were literally real, that most of these things did happen. Like, the chain of events being portrayed is mostly accurate. Clark was crazy, he went into the back rooms, he was her client, she went out into the back rooms after him, and she ended up in async, yada, yada, yada. But we are not seeing it for how it really happened. We are not just seeing a time capsule or a recording of history. We are seeing it through the flawed narration, flawed memory of Mary as it is trying to be researched and understood and scanned from her mind after she went all through these things. This is why it's my favorite, is I feel like it can be so interesting on every level, because, like, if you take some of the other theories, they're kind of like one-dimensional. As interesting as they are, they don't apply on every level, or at least for, like, I don't know, the parasite one, because I haven't thought about that. This one is so interesting to me because, Like, it just seems to take into account every level of the movie. Like, thematically, it takes into account the characters. It tries to explain, what was that sound? It tries to explain whether the backrooms are real or not, how they are there. And with this take, it takes into account async as well. But I feel like for the sake of this video, I'll lean into that idea that this is perhaps async, because they were previously an MRI company, that we are seeing async's brain scan of Mary, that they are trying to understand this through her flawed memory, perhaps. Like, low battery warning, hello. I don't know. I haven't really settled on if there's one particular way I like to view this the most, but I think this conveys my point better. The better connects all the ideas I presented and why it's so interesting to me, and it actually gives a name or a description to the theory rather than just talking about it forever.